The morning mist clung to the ancient stone walls of Ravenshollow Castle like a shroud of secrets. Sir Marcus Blackwood adjusted his ceremonial uniform, the golden threads catching the pale sunlight that filtered through the tall windows of the guardhouse. After 23 years of dedicated service to the crown, he had learned to read the subtle signs that whispered of trouble brewing within the palace walls. Today felt different. The servants moved with hushed urgency, their eyes darting nervously as they passed. Even the castle's usually cheerful cook, Mrs. Pemberton, had worn a grim expression when she served breakfast to the royal guard. Something was stirring in the heart of the kingdom, and Marcus could feel it in his bones. The late Queen Isabella had been gone for nearly 5 years now, but her presence still lingered in every corridor, every portrait, and every carefully tended rose in the memorial garden. She had been beloved by the people, a beacon of grace and compassion who had modernized the monarchy while maintaining its dignity. Her tragic death in a carriage accident had shaken the entire nation to its core. Marcus remembered that terrible night vividly. He had been part of her security detail, had seen the wreckage, had held vigil at her bedside in those final moments. The Queen's last words had been about her children, particularly her eldest son, Prince Alexander, and her beloved daughter, Princess Sophia. "Protect them," she had whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the life support machines. "Protect what we've built." Now, 5 years later, that promise weighed heavily on Marcus's shoulders. King Alexander had married Lady Victoria Ashford 2 years after his mother's death, a union that had raised eyebrows among the nobility and caused considerable unrest among the common people. Victoria was ambitious, calculating, and possessed a sharp tongue that could cut through steel. She had never hidden her disdain for the way Queen Isabella had run the court, often making snide remarks about the old ways and the unnecessary sentimentality of the previous reign. The tension between Victoria and Princess Sophia had been evident from the beginning. Sophia, now 28, had inherited her mother's compassion and natural charisma. The people adored her, often comparing her favorably to the late Queen. This adoration only served to fuel Victoria's jealousy and resentment. The new Queen had made it her mission to diminish Sophia's role in royal affairs, systematically removing her from important ceremonies and state functions. Marcus paused at the entrance to the East Wing, where Princess Sophia maintained her private apartments. The corridor was lined with portraits of previous monarchs, their painted eyes seeming to watch his every move. He had requested this morning meeting to discuss the increasing security concerns surrounding the princess. There had been reports of suspicious individuals near the memorial garden, and several threatening letters had been intercepted by the Royal Mail Service. The princess's lady-in-waiting, Eleanor Fitzgerald, greeted Marcus at the door. Eleanor had served the royal family for over a decade and had been particularly close to Queen Isabella. Her loyalty to the crown was unquestionable, but Marcus could see the worry etched in the lines around her eyes. "She's in the study," Eleanor said quietly, glancing over her shoulder. "She's been reading her mother's old journals again. The anniversary is approaching, you know." Marcus nodded grimly. The 5th anniversary of Queen Isabella's death was just 3 weeks away, and the entire palace was on edge. It was tradition for the royal family to hold a public memorial service, but this year, Queen Victoria had suggested scaling back the ceremony. She claimed it was time to move forward and stop dwelling on the past. The suggestion had caused a fierce argument between the king and Princess Sophia, with voices raised so loudly that even the guards had heard every word. Princess Sophia looked up from her reading as Marcus entered the study. She was seated by the window, morning light casting a golden halo around her auburn hair. Her resemblance to her mother was striking, from the gentle curve of her smile to the intelligent spark in her green eyes. However, those eyes now held a sadness that seemed too heavy for someone so young. "Sir Marcus," she said, setting down the leather-bound journal. "Eleanor said you had urgent matters to discuss." Marcus bowed respectfully before taking the seat she offered across from her desk. The study was warm and inviting, filled with books, family photographs, and fresh flowers from the memorial garden. It was a stark contrast to Queen Victoria's cold, modernized chambers. "Your Highness, I've received several reports that concern me greatly," Marcus began, his voice measured and professional. "There have been unusual activities around the palace grounds, particularly near areas associated with the late Queen's memory.
I believe someone may be planning to disrupt the upcoming memorial service. Sophia's expression grew serious. What kind of activities?
Strangers asking questions in the village about palace routines, someone attempting to access the memorial garden after hours, and these. Marcus pulled out a folder containing several letters. The Royal Mail Service intercepted these before they reached you. The handwriting analysis suggests they're all from the same person. Sophia read the letters silently, her face growing paler with each page. The messages were filled with venom, accusing her of trying to overshadow the current queen and threatening consequences if she didn't know her place. The final letter was the most disturbing, containing detailed knowledge of her daily routines and a promise that the memorial service will be remembered for all the wrong reasons.
Have you shown these to the king? Sophia asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer.
Marcus shifted uncomfortably.
I presented them to His Majesty yesterday. He believes they're the work of a harmless crank and doesn't want to cause unnecessary alarm.
Queen Victoria was present during our meeting and agreed that increasing security might send the wrong message to the public. The princess was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the memorial garden where her mother's favorite roses were just beginning to bloom.
She wants the threats to be real, doesn't she?
Sophia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper.
Marcus felt his jaw tighten.
He had served the crown faithfully for over 2 decades, had sworn an oath to protect the royal family regardless of personal feelings. But he couldn't ignore what his eyes and ears told him. Queen Victoria's animosity toward Princess Sophia had grown increasingly bold and dangerous. Your Highness, I cannot speak to the Queen's motivations, Marcus replied diplomatically, but I can tell you that my primary concern is your safety. These threats are credible, and I believe we need to take additional precautions. Sophia stood and walked to the window, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture that reminded Marcus painfully of her mother.
You know what she said to me yesterday? She asked without turning around.
Victoria told me that my mother's memorial garden was taking up valuable space that could be used for something more practical. She suggested turning it into a parking area for visiting dignitaries. Marcus felt a surge of anger but kept his expression neutral. What did you tell her?
I told her that the garden stays, Sophia replied, turning to face him.
I told her that some things are sacred, that my mother's memory deserves more respect than convenient parking spaces.
She didn't like that very much.
The conversation was interrupted by the sound of raised voices in the corridor outside. Eleanor's voice was among them, attempting to maintain order, but she was clearly being overruled by someone with more authority. Marcus immediately stood and moved toward the door, his hand instinctively moving to the ceremonial sword at his side. The study door burst open without ceremony, and Queen Victoria strode in, her face flushed with anger. She was followed by 2 of her personal guards, men who had joined the royal security detail only after her marriage to the king. Behind them, Eleanor looked mortified and helpless. I might have known I'd find you here, filling my stepdaughter's head with paranoid fantasies, Victoria said, her icy blue eyes fixed on Marcus. She was an undeniably beautiful woman, with platinum blonde hair and sharp features, but her beauty had a cold, predatory quality that made Marcus deeply uncomfortable.
Your Majesty, Marcus said, bowing stiffly.
I was discussing legitimate security concerns with Princess Sophia.
Security concerns?
Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in the sound.
You mean these ridiculous letters from some village idiot with too much time on his hands? Alexander told me about your melodramatic presentation yesterday.
Really, Sir Marcus, I would have expected more sense from someone with your experience. Princess Sophia stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. These threats mentioned specific details about my daily routine, Victoria.
Someone has been watching me, studying my movements. That's not the work of a harmless crank.
Oh, please, Victoria waved dismissively.
You're so desperate for attention that you're seeing conspiracies everywhere.
Perhaps if you spent less time wallowing in your mother's memory and more time supporting your brother's reign, you wouldn't feel the need to manufacture drama. The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus saw Sophia flinch as if she had been physically struck, and he felt his carefully maintained professional composure begin to crack. With respect, Your Majesty, Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger, Princess Sophia has done nothing but honor her mother's memory and serve the crown with distinction. These threats are real, and they require a serious response. Victoria turned her full attention to Marcus, her eyes glittering dangerously.
Are you questioning my judgment, Sir Marcus?
Because it sounds very much like you're taking sides in matters that are none of your concern. I'm doing my job, Marcus replied evenly.
My oath is to protect the royal family, all members of the royal family, regardless of personal politics. The Queen's expression grew even colder.
Your oath is to the crown, which means you serve at the pleasure of the king. And the king agrees with me that these threats are meaningless.
Perhaps it's time you remembered where your loyalties should lie.
Marcus felt the weight of 23 years of faithful service pressing down on him. He had served under 3 monarchs, had risked his life countless times for the crown, had sacrificed personal relationships and his own family for duty. But, as he looked at Princess Sophia's stricken face and remembered Queen Isabella's dying words, he realized that some things were more important than blind obedience. My loyalties lie with justice and honor, Marcus said quietly. And, with protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Victoria's face went white with rage.
How dare you?
You forget yourself, Sir Marcus.
You are a servant, nothing more.
Your opinions on royal family matters are neither wanted nor welcome. Victoria, please, Sophia interjected, attempting to defuse the situation. Sir Marcus is only doing his job.
There's no need for this hostility. Hostility?
Victoria whirled on her stepdaughter.
You want to see hostility?
I'll show you hostility. I'm tired of your constant manipulation, your pathetic attempts to upstage me at every turn.
You think the people love you? You think you're some kind of saint because you tend to your mother's roses and smile at peasants?
You're nothing but a spoiled child living in the past. The Queen's voice had risen to a near shriek, and spittle flew from her lips as she spoke. Her carefully composed facade had cracked completely, revealing the raw hatred beneath. Marcus stepped protectively closer to Princess Sophia, his hand moving instinctively to his sword hilt.
Your Majesty, I must ask you to lower your voice and step back.
Victoria noticed the movement and laughed mockingly.
Oh, how romantic.
The noble knight protecting his precious princess.
Tell me, Sir Marcus, is your concern purely professional, or is there something more personal at stake?
The implication was clear and deeply insulting. Marcus felt his face burn with anger and shame.
Your Majesty, you go too far. I go too far?
Victoria's voice cracked like a whip.
I'm the queen of this realm. I'll go as far as I please. And if you don't like it, you can find yourself another position.
God knows there are plenty of younger, more loyal men who would be happy to take your place. Princess Sophia moved forward, placing herself between Marcus and the Queen.
That's enough, Victoria.
Sir Marcus has served this family faithfully for over 20 years.
He deserves respect, not your petty jealousy and spite. Jealousy?
Victoria's laugh was sharp and cruel.
Of what? Your tragic little shrine to a dead woman? Your pathetic popularity contests with the common people? I'm the Queen, Sophia. I'm the one wearing the crown, not you. The crown doesn't make you royal, Sophia said quietly, but her words carried clearly in the tense silence. Character does. Grace does. My mother understood that.
Victoria's face contorted with fury. For a moment, Marcus thought she might actually strike Princess Sophia. Instead, she turned on her heel and stalked toward the door, her guards hastily following.
This isn't over, she said without looking back. Not by a long shot.
After the Queen had left, the study fell into heavy silence. Eleanor rushed to Princess Sophia's side, checking to make sure she was unharmed, while Marcus stood motionless, his mind racing with the implications of what had just occurred. I'm sorry, Sophia said finally, her voice shaking slightly.
You shouldn't have had to witness that.
And you shouldn't have been put in that position because of me.
Marcus shook his head. Your Highness, you have nothing to apologize for. But, I'm afraid this confrontation has made our situation much more dangerous. Queen Victoria now sees me as a direct threat to her authority. What does that mean? Eleanor asked worriedly.
Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his options.
He could back down, apologize to the Queen, and hope to salvage his position.
He could request a transfer to a different assignment, away from the volatile situation at court. Or he could do what Queen Isabella had asked of him 5 years ago, protect what they had built, regardless of the personal cost.
It means, Marcus said slowly, that we need to be even more careful. The threats in those letters may not be the only danger Princess Sophia faces.
Sophia looked at him with understanding.
You think Victoria might be involved in them?
I think Queen Victoria is capable of many things in pursuit of what she wants, Marcus replied diplomatically.
And, I think we need to take every precaution to ensure your safety, regardless of official orders. Eleanor wrung her hands nervously. But, if the king has forbidden additional security measures,
then, we'll have to be creative, Marcus said grimly. There are loyal guards in the detail, men who served under Queen Isabella and remember what true nobility looks like.
We'll find ways to keep Princess Sophia safe without making it obvious.
Princess Sophia walked back to the window, looking out at the memorial garden where her mother's roses swayed gently in the morning breeze.
She wants to destroy it all, doesn't she?
Every trace of my mother, every reminder of who we used to be. Marcus joined her at the window.
Queen Isabella's legacy isn't just in roses and portraits, Your Highness.
It lives in the people who loved her, in the values she taught, and in the daughter who carries on her work. That's not something Queen Victoria can destroy, no matter how hard she tries. But, even as he spoke those reassuring words, Marcus felt a chill of foreboding. The confrontation with Queen Victoria had revealed the true depth of her animosity, and he knew that someone driven by such hatred was capable of almost anything. The memorial service was still 3 weeks away, but he suspected that the real battles were just beginning. As if reading his thoughts, Princess Sophia turned from the window with a look of quiet determination.
Sir Marcus, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm grateful for your loyalty. My mother chose well when she trusted you with her family's protection. Marcus bowed deeply.
It has been my greatest honor to serve, Your Highness.
And that service continues, regardless of threats or consequences.
Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were harbingers of much darker times ahead.
The seeds of conflict had been planted, and he feared that the upcoming memorial service would be the catalyst that brought everything to a head. The game of royal politics was about to become deadly serious, and Marcus knew that he would need all of his experience, cunning, and courage to protect the woman who represented everything good about the monarchy. Queen Isabella's legacy hung in the balance, and he would die before he let it be destroyed by jealousy and ambition. As the morning wore on and the palace settled into its usual routines, Marcus began making discreet inquiries among the guard staff. He needed allies, trusted men who would put duty above politics and right above convenience. The threats were real, the danger was growing, and time was running out. The Guardian's oath was about to be tested as never before. #shadows and whispers. 3 days had passed since the explosive confrontation in Princess Sophia's study, and the atmosphere at Raven's Hollow Castle had grown increasingly tense. Marcus found himself walking a careful line between his duty to protect the princess and his obligation to maintain at least the appearance of respect for Queen Victoria's authority. The palace staff moved about their duties with nervous energy, sensing the undercurrents of conflict that rippled through the ancient halls. Marcus had spent those 3 days quietly building a network of loyal allies among the guard. Sergeant William Hayes, a grizzled veteran who had served alongside Marcus for 15 years, had been the first to offer his support. "Something's not right here, sir," Hayes had said during their clandestine meeting in the armory. "The lads are talking, and what they're saying isn't good. Some of the Queen's new guards have been asking questions about the princess's schedule, wanting to know when she visits the memorial garden and who she meets with." Lieutenant James Crawford, a younger officer who had been personally recruited by Queen Isabella before her death, had also pledged his assistance. "My oath was to the crown, but the crown meant something different when Queen Isabella was alive," Crawford had confided. "Now it feels like we're serving politics instead of principles.
Even among the palace staff, Marcus had found unexpected support. Mrs. Pemberton, the cook, had approached him discreetly to report strange conversations she had overheard among some of the newer servants. "They're not asking innocent questions," she had whispered urgently. "They want to know about the princess's habits, her favorite places in the castle, when she's most likely to be alone."
"It's not natural curiosity, Sir Marcus. It's something else."
The most troubling intelligence had come from Thomas Whitmore, the elderly gardener who tended the memorial garden. Thomas had served the royal family for over 30 years and had been particularly devoted to Queen Isabella. He had noticed unusual activities around the garden in recent weeks, fresh footprints where no one should have been walking, evidence that someone had been examining the security measures, and, most disturbing of all, several of Queen Isabella's prized rose bushes had been damaged in a way that suggested deliberate sabotage. "Whoever's doing this knows the garden well," Thomas had explained as he showed Marcus the damaged plants.
"These cuts weren't made by animals or weather.
Someone's been coming here at night, and they know exactly which roses were the Queen's favorites.
It's like they're trying to send a message."
Marcus knelt beside one of the damaged bushes, examining the clean cuts that had severed several prize-winning blooms. The roses had been Queen Isabella's passion, and she had spent countless hours in this garden, often bringing young Sophia to help with the planting and care. The deliberate destruction felt personal, calculated to cause maximum emotional damage.
"Have you mentioned this to anyone else?" Marcus asked. Thomas shook his head. "Only you, sir. I didn't know who to trust."
"There's been talk among some of the staff about closing down the garden, saying it's too expensive to maintain. The new Queen's people have been pushing for it, claiming it would be more practical to use the space for other purposes." Marcus felt a cold fury building in his chest. The memorial garden had been created as a living tribute to Queen Isabella's memory, a place where the people could come to pay their respects and remember their beloved monarch. The thought of it being destroyed for practical purposes was almost too painful to contemplate. That evening, Marcus requested a private meeting with Princess Sophia in her apartments. Eleanor admitted him to the sitting room, where he found the princess reading correspondence from various charitable organizations that she supported. Despite the stress of recent events, she had maintained her busy schedule of public appearances and philanthropic work, much to Queen Victoria's obvious irritation. "You look troubled, Sir Marcus," Sophia observed, setting aside her letters.
"Has something new developed?"
Marcus updated her on the intelligence he had gathered, watching her face grow increasingly grave as he described the suspicious activities and the damage to her mother's roses. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring at the portrait of Queen Isabella that hung above the fireplace. "She's trying to erase her," Sophia said finally.
"Not just the garden, not just the memorial service.
She wants to wipe away every trace of my mother's influence, every reminder that people once loved a queen who put duty before ambition." "Your Highness, I believe the situation is becoming more dangerous by the day," Marcus said carefully. "The threats in those letters may have been just the beginning.
Someone is conducting surveillance on you, studying your patterns, gathering information."
"I think we need to consider the possibility that the upcoming memorial service is being targeted for some kind of incident."
Sophia nodded slowly. "What kind of incident?"
"I don't know yet, but I have a very bad feeling about it. The memorial service will be the largest public gathering associated with your mother's memory since her funeral. It's exactly the kind of high-profile event that someone with malicious intent would want to disrupt." Eleanor, who had been listening quietly from her chair by the window, suddenly spoke up.
"Your Highness, perhaps we should suggest postponing the service? Just until the security concerns can be properly addressed?"
"Absolutely not," Sophia replied firmly.
"That's exactly what Victoria wants.
She's been pushing to scale back the memorial from the beginning, and if we postpone it now, she'll find reasons to cancel it altogether. My mother deserves better than that, and so do the people who loved her." Marcus admired her courage but feared for her safety. "Then, we need to find another way to protect you. I've been thinking about the logistics of the service, and there are several vulnerabilities that concern me." Before Sophia could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. Eleanor rose to answer it, but, before she could reach the door, it swung open to reveal King Alexander standing in the doorway. He looked haggard and tired, with dark circles under his eyes and deep lines of stress etched into his face. Behind him stood two of Queen Victoria's personal guards.
"Sophia, we need to talk," Alexander said without preamble.
His voice was strained, and Marcus noticed that his hands were trembling slightly. Princess Sophia rose gracefully from her chair.
"Of course, Alexander. Please, come in."
The king entered the room but remained standing near the door, as if he might need to make a quick exit. The guards stayed in the hallway, but Marcus could see them positioning themselves to observe the conversation. "I've had a very difficult conversation with Victoria," Alexander began, running a hand through his disheveled hair.
She's very upset about what happened the other day.
She feels that her authority is being undermined, that her position as queen is not being properly respected." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he remained silent.
Princess Sophia's expression was carefully neutral as she regarded her brother.
"I'm sorry if my defense of Sir Marcus and my refusal to accept her insults caused problems," Sophia said evenly. "But I won't apologize for standing up for people who have served our family faithfully."
Alexander flinched as if she had struck him. "Sophia, please. You have to understand the position I'm in.
Victoria is my wife, she's the queen, and she has certain expectations about how things should be handled."
"What kind of expectations?" Sophia asked, though Marcus suspected she already knew the answer.
The king glanced nervously toward the doorway where his wife's guards waited. "She wants Sir Marcus removed from your security detail. She says he's become too personally invested, that his judgment is compromised. She's also concerned about the memorial service, thinks it might be better to have a smaller, more private ceremony this year." Marcus felt his heart sink. He had known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier to bear.
23 years of faithful service, reduced to political maneuvering and personal vendettas. "And what do you think, Alexander?" Sophia asked quietly. "Do you believe Sir Marcus's judgment is compromised? Do you think our mother's memory deserves less honor this year than in years past?"
The king's face crumpled slightly, and, for a moment, Marcus saw the uncertain boy he had once been rather than the monarch he had become. I think I'm trying to hold a kingdom together while my wife and my sister tear each other apart. I think I'm tired of being caught in the middle of arguments I never wanted to have." It was a heartbreaking admission of weakness, and Marcus felt a surge of pity for the man who had inherited a crown he wasn't prepared to wear. Queen Isabella had been grooming Alexander to rule, but her death had cut short his preparation. Victoria had filled the void left by his mother's guidance, but her influence had been poisonous rather than nurturing. "Alexander," Sophia said gently, moving closer to her brother.
"You don't have to choose between your wife and your family. But you do have to choose between what's right and what's convenient."
"It's not that simple," Alexander replied, his voice breaking slightly. "Victoria has support among the noble families, connections that are important for the stability of the realm. If I oppose her too openly, it could cause problems that go far beyond our personal disagreements." Marcus understood the political realities, but he also recognized the familiar pattern of an abuser isolating their victim from sources of support and alternative perspectives. Victoria had systematically removed people who might challenge her influence over the king, replacing them with individuals who owed their positions to her patronage.
"Your Majesty," Marcus said, stepping forward despite the risks. "If I may speak plainly?"
Alexander looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension.
"Please do, Sir Marcus.
I value your perspective. Queen Isabella raised you to be a king who would put the needs of his people before personal comfort. She believed in justice, compassion, and the idea that nobility comes from service rather than birth. Those principles made her beloved by the people and respected by the world. The question you have to ask yourself is whether you want to be remembered as the king who honored that legacy or the one who let it be destroyed by political expedients." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Alexander's guard shifted uncomfortably, and Marcus knew that every word of this conversation would be reported back to Queen Victoria within the hour. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring at the portrait of his mother that dominated the sitting room. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "She haunts me, you know. I see her in my dreams, and she's always disappointed. Always asking me why I let things get so bad. Then, maybe it's time to start making decisions that would make her proud," Sophia said softly, taking her brother's hand. "Starting with the memorial service. Let it be what it should be, a celebration of everything good she represented." Alexander squeezed his sister's hand, and, for a moment, Marcus saw a glimmer of the man he might have become under different circumstances. But, then, the king's expression hardened, and he pulled away from Sophia's touch. "I can't," he said, his voice filled with self-loathing. "Victoria has made it clear that if I don't start supporting her positions more publicly, she'll make things very difficult for everyone. She has friends at court, allies who could cause significant problems if they chose to." "What kind of problems?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Alexander glanced toward the guards again, then leaned closer and lowered his voice. "There are rumors being spread about Sophia, suggestions that she's planning to challenge my authority, that she sees herself as a rival rather than a supporter. Victoria's people are encouraging these rumors, making it seem like Sophia is the source of instability in the kingdom." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. It was a classic political maneuver: create a crisis, then position yourself as the only solution. By portraying Princess Sophia as a threat to royal stability, Victoria could justify taking more extreme measures against her stepdaughter. "That's ridiculous," Eleanor burst out from her position by the window. "Princess Sophia has never done anything but support the crown and serve the people. She has no political ambitions beyond continuing her mother's charitable work." "I know that," Alexander said miserably. "But Victoria is very persuasive, and she has evidence that can be interpreted in different ways. Letters from foreign dignitaries who prefer dealing with Sophia, reports of crowds cheering more loudly for her than for Victoria at public events, even photographs that show her receiving more media attention." Marcus realized with growing horror that they were witnessing a sophisticated campaign to systematically destroy Princess Sophia's reputation and influence. Victoria wasn't just jealous of her stepdaughter's popularity, she was actively working to eliminate her as a perceived threat. "So what happens now?" Sophia asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Alexander couldn't meet her eyes. "Victoria wants Sir Marcus transferred to a different assignment, effective immediately. She also wants the memorial service limited to close family only, no public attendance, no media coverage. She says it's for security reasons, but it's really about control," Sophia finished. "She wants to minimize any reminder of what the monarchy used to represent." The king nodded miserably. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm so sorry. But I don't see any other choice." Marcus stepped forward, his decision made. "Your Majesty, I respectfully request permission to resign my commission rather than accept a transfer." Alexander looked stricken. "Marcus, no. Your service record is impeccable. This is just politics, it doesn't reflect on your abilities or your dedication." "With respect, Your Majesty, it reflects on something much more important than my career," Marcus replied. "It reflects on whether I can live with myself if I abandon the people I've sworn to protect." Before Alexander could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway outside. Raised voices, running footsteps, and, then, Queen Victoria herself appeared in the doorway. She was dressed in an elegant evening gown, but her face was flushed with anger and her eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "A lovely family reunion, complete with the faithful retainer offering to fall on his sword. How terribly dramatic." Alexander turned to face his wife, and Marcus could see the fear in the king's eyes. "Victoria, we were just discussing the arrangements for the memorial service." "Were you really?" Victoria stepped into the room, flanked by her guards. "Because from what I could hear in the hallway, it sounded more like a conspiracy meeting. Plotting against the crown, perhaps?" "That's a serious accusation," Marcus said quietly, his hand instinctively moving toward his sword. Victoria noticed the gesture and smiled coldly. "Oh, please do give me a reason, Sir Marcus. I would so enjoy watching you explain to a court-martial why you drew steel against your queen." The tension in the room was electric, and Marcus realized that Victoria had orchestrated this confrontation deliberately. She had waited until she knew where to find them all together, had brought witnesses, and had prepared her accusations in advance. This was a trap, and they had walked right into it. "Victoria, that's enough," Alexander said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, Alexander, it's not enough," Victoria replied, never taking her eyes off Marcus. "It's time everyone understood exactly where they stand in the new order. Sir Marcus, you are hereby relieved of all duties related to Princess Sophia's security, effective immediately. You will report to the garrison commander tomorrow morning for reassignment." Marcus felt the weight of his oath pressing down on him. He could accept the reassignment, keep his position, and hope to serve the royal family in some other capacity. Or he could take a stand here and, now, consequences be damned. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Your Majesty," Marcus said clearly. The room fell silent except for the sound of Eleanor's sharp intake of breath. Victoria's smile widened, showing her teeth like a predator sensing wounded prey. "I beg your pardon?" Victoria said softly, dangerously. "I said I can't do that," Marcus repeated, his voice steady and strong. "My oath was to protect the royal family from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I believe Princess Sophia is in genuine danger, and I will not abandon that responsibility regardless of political pressure." Victoria's mask of cold composure finally slipped completely. Her face contorted with rage, and she took a step toward Marcus, her hand raised as if to strike him. "How dare you!" she shrieked. "You arrogant, insubordinate fool! I am your queen, and you will obey me, or I'll have you thrown in the dungeons for treason." But before Victoria could complete her threatening gesture, Marcus moved with the lightning reflexes that had served him well in 23 years of military service. He caught her wrist gently but firmly, preventing her from striking him while being careful not to use excessive force. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "I suggest you think very carefully about your next words and actions. There are witnesses present, and threatening a member of the Royal Guard with imprisonment for performing his sworn duty would raise uncomfortable questions about your motivations." For a moment, Victoria struggled against his grip, her eyes blazing with fury and humiliation. But then, she seemed to realize the precarious nature of her position. If she pushed too hard, if she made too dramatic a scene, it might draw the kind of attention she couldn't control. Marcus released her wrist and stepped back, maintaining a respectful but ready stance. Victoria rubbed her wrist theatrically, as if he had injured her, and Marcus realized she was already planning how to use this incident against him. "You put your hands on me," Victoria said, her voice filled with theatrical outrage. "You dared to touch your queen in anger. That's assault, treason, an attack on the crown itself." But before anyone could respond to this accusation, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "Actually, what I saw was a loyal guard preventing an assault on a member of his service," came a crisp, authoritative voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Lady Margaret Thornfield standing in the entrance to the sitting room. Lady Margaret was the Queen Mother's younger sister, a formidable woman in her 70s who commanded enormous respect among the nobility. She had been away from court for several months, attending to family business in the northern provinces, and her sudden appearance caught everyone off guard. "Aunt Margaret," Alexander said, clearly shocked. "We didn't know you had returned." Lady Margaret entered the room with the dignified bearing that had made her one of the most respected members of the royal family. She was wearing traveling clothes and looked tired from her journey, but her eyes were sharp and alert as she surveyed the scene. "I arrived an hour ago and was looking for Sophia to inform her of my return," Lady Margaret said, her gaze moving from person to person in the room. "Imagine my surprise to find the Queen threatening a loyal guardsman with imprisonment for doing his duty." Victoria's face went pale, but she quickly recovered her composure. "Lady Margaret, you misunderstood the situation. Sir Marcus was being insubordinate, refusing a direct order from his queen." "Was he really?" Lady Margaret's voice was deceptively mild, but Marcus recognized the steel beneath the silk.
And what order was that, my dear?
I ordered him to accept reassignment away from Sophia's security detail, Victoria replied, lifting her chin defiantly.
He refused to comply. Lady Margaret nodded thoughtfully. I see. And, did you give him a reason for this reassignment? Has his service been unsatisfactory in some way?
His judgment has become compromised, Victoria said, clearly trying to regain control of the situation.
He's become too personally involved with Princess Sophia's welfare.
Ah, Lady Margaret said, her tone growing even more dangerously mild.
So you're saying that a guard who takes his protective duties seriously has compromised judgment? That caring about the safety of those he's sworn to protect is somehow inappropriate?
Marcus could see Victoria realizing that she was walking into a trap, but she had committed too deeply to her position to back down gracefully. I'm saying that Sir Marcus has forgotten his place, Victoria snapped. He serves at the pleasure of the crown, and if the crown decides he needs to be reassigned, he has no right to refuse. Lady Margaret was quiet for a moment, studying Victoria with the kind of penetrating gaze that had cowed stronger people than the current queen. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of decades of royal authority. My dear child, she said, and the condescending endearment made Victoria's jaw clench.
Perhaps it's you who has forgotten something important. The crown is not a person, it's an institution.
It represents justice, honor, and the sacred trust between monarch and subject. When someone wearing the crown acts in ways that betray those principles, they diminish the crown itself. The rebuke was devastating in its quiet dignity. Victoria's face flushed red with embarrassment and anger, but she couldn't openly challenge Lady Margaret without risking a scandal that would damage her position irreparably. Furthermore, Lady Margaret continued, I've spent the last several months traveling through the northern provinces, speaking with people from all walks of life.
Do you know what they told me about the royal family?
They spoke with genuine love about Isabella's memory and, with great affection for Princess Sophia's charitable work. But, when your name came up, Victoria, the conversations became uncomfortable. The implication was clear, and Marcus saw Victoria's hands clench into fists at her sides. But Lady Margaret wasn't finished.
If you want to command respect and loyalty, you must first show that you understand what those concepts mean.
Threatening faithful servants, attempting to diminish the memory of a beloved queen, and creating unnecessary conflict within the royal family are not the actions of a wise ruler.
They're the actions of someone who sees the crown as a tool for personal gratification rather than a sacred responsibility.
The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander looked mortified, Princess Sophia appeared relieved but concerned, and Victoria seemed to be struggling with whether to explode in rage or retreat to fight another day.
Finally, Victoria chose retreat, but not without a parting shot.
This conversation is far from over, she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. And, Sir Marcus, don't think that having allies will save you from the consequences of your insubordination. She swept from the room with her guards, leaving behind an atmosphere of tense relief mixed with apprehension about what would come next. Lady Margaret watched until Victoria was out of earshot, then turned to address the remaining group. Well, she said dryly, it seems I've returned to quite an interesting situation.
Marcus bowed deeply. Lady Margaret, I cannot thank you enough for your intervention.
Don't thank me yet, Sir Marcus, she replied with a tired smile.
I suspect we've only delayed the inevitable confrontation, not prevented it.
Victoria is not the type to forgive perceived slights, and you've just given her a very powerful enemy.
Princess Sophia moved to embrace her great-aunt. I'm so glad you're back.
Things have been difficult. So I can see, my dear, Lady Margaret said, returning the embrace. But perhaps it's time someone reminded certain people what the monarchy is supposed to represent. Your mother would be appalled by what's been happening here. As the evening wore on and the immediate crisis passed, Marcus realized that the battle lines had been drawn more clearly than ever. Victoria now had additional motivation to destroy him, but she also had formidable opposition in Lady Margaret. The upcoming memorial service had become more than just a ceremony, it was shaping up to be the focal point of a struggle for the very soul of the monarchy. The shadows were growing longer, and Marcus knew that the real test of his oath was yet to come. The Web Titans. Lady Margaret's return to court had provided a temporary reprieve, but Marcus knew it was only that, temporary. Over the following week, he watched Victoria carefully, noting how she maneuvered through the complex social dynamics of palace life with the skill of a seasoned politician. She was biding her time, gathering intelligence, and building alliances for what was clearly going to be a decisive confrontation. The Queen had not directly challenged Lady Margaret's intervention, but she had found subtle ways to express her displeasure. Servants who had shown support for Princess Sophia found their duties reassigned to less desirable positions. Guards who had been part of Marcus's informal network were transferred to different shifts or sent on extended assignments away from the castle. The message was clear: crossing Queen Victoria came with consequences. Marcus had spent the week deepening his investigation into the threats against Princess Sophia, and what he had discovered was far more alarming than he had initially realized. The pattern of surveillance and intelligence gathering was too sophisticated to be the work of a single disturbed individual. Someone with significant resources and insider knowledge was orchestrating a campaign against the princess, and Marcus was beginning to suspect that the source was closer to home than he had wanted to believe. His investigation had led him to a small room in the castle's east tower, where the royal correspondence was processed and filed. The elderly clerk who managed this department, Mr. Cornelius Ashworth, had served the royal family for over 40 years and had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of the patterns and protocols of royal communication. "It's not what's here that concerns me, Sir Marcus," Ashworth had explained during their clandestine meeting. "It's what's missing. There should be copies of all outgoing correspondence from the royal household, but I've noticed gaps. Letters that were dictated and prepared but never made it into the official files." Ashworth had shown Marcus the filing system, explaining how each piece of correspondence was supposed to be logged and archived. The gaps he had identified corresponded almost exactly with the timeline of increasing pressure on Princess Sophia. Furthermore, Ashworth continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I've observed some of Queen Victoria's personal staff accessing files they have no business examining. Personnel records for guards and servants, schedules of royal activities, even architectural plans of the castle grounds. When I questioned one of them about it, I was told that the Queen was conducting a security review, but no one bothered to inform me officially." Marcus felt the pieces of a disturbing puzzle beginning to fall into place. The threats, the surveillance, the systematic campaign to isolate Princess Sophia, it all pointed to a coordinated effort that went far beyond simple jealousy or personal animosity. His suspicions were further confirmed when Sergeant Hayes approached him with troubling intelligence from the guard barracks. Some of Queen Victoria's personal guards had been asking detailed questions about the castle's security protocols, particularly those related to the memorial garden and Princess Sophia's daily routines. "It's not the questions themselves that worry me, sir," Hayes had explained. "It's the way they're asking them. These men aren't interested in improving security, they're mapping vulnerabilities. And they're being very careful not to ask the same person too many questions, spreading their inquiries around so it's harder to see the pattern." Marcus had also received a cryptic warning from Mrs. Pemberton, delivered while she was serving dinner to the guard staff. She had leaned close while refilling his teacup and whispered, "The roses in the kitchen garden are blooming beautifully this year. Such a shame that some people think they need pruning so severely." It was a coded message they had agreed upon, her way of telling him that she had overheard conversations suggesting that the memorial service itself was being targeted for some kind of disruption. The most chilling intelligence had come from Thomas Whitmore, the head gardener. He had discovered that someone had been conducting detailed reconnaissance of the memorial garden, not just the casual observation they had initially suspected. Whoever was responsible had been measuring distances, studying sightlines, and examining the structural integrity of various monuments and garden features. "They know this place as well as I do now," Thomas had reported grimly. "Better, maybe. They've been here multiple times, always at night, always careful to cover their tracks. But I've been tending these grounds for 30 years, and I can read the signs. Whoever's doing this is planning something specific, something that requires precise knowledge of the garden's layout." All of this intelligence painted a picture of a sophisticated operation designed to create maximum chaos and damage during the memorial service. Marcus realized that the threats in the anonymous letters had been just the beginning, a way to gauge the palace's response and identify potential vulnerabilities in Princess Sophia's security arrangements. But the most disturbing revelation had come from an unexpected source. Lady Margaret had requested a private meeting with Marcus in her chambers, and what she revealed had shaken him to his core. "I've been conducting my own inquiries since returning to court," Lady Margaret had told him, her lined face grave with concern. "I have contacts throughout the kingdom, people who have served the royal family for generations and who understand the importance of discretion. What they've told me suggests that Victoria's ambitions go far beyond simple jealousy of Sophia." Lady Margaret had poured herself a small glass of sherry before continuing, her hands steady despite the gravity of what she was revealing. "There are rumors circulating among certain noble families that Victoria has been discussing the succession question with increasing frequency. She's been suggesting that Alexander's reign has been weakened by his inability to control family conflicts, and that perhaps it's time to consider alternative arrangements." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Alternative arrangements? Victoria has been hinting that she might be better suited to rule directly rather than merely as queen consort. She's been cultivating relationships with noble families who have grievances against the current administration, promising them favorable treatment in exchange for support. It's textbook political maneuvering, designed to position herself as the solution to the kingdom's problems. The implications were staggering. If Victoria was truly contemplating some form of coup against her own husband, then Princess Sophia represented more than just a personal rival, she was a potential rallying point for those who remained loyal to Queen Isabella's legacy. "But surely Alexander knows about this?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Lady Margaret shook her head sadly. "Alexander sees what Victoria allows him to see. She's very skilled at managing information and controlling narratives. He's isolated from independent sources of intelligence, surrounded by people who owe their positions to Victoria's patronage. He genuinely believes that his wife is trying to strengthen the monarchy rather than undermine it." Marcus thought about his recent interactions with the king and realized how accurate Lady Margaret's assessment was. Alexander had become increasingly dependent on Victoria's counsel, deferring to her judgment even when it conflicted with his own instincts. The transformation had been gradual but unmistakable. "What do you think she's planning for the memorial service?" Marcus asked. Lady Margaret was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the memorial garden where Queen Isabella's roses were reaching their peak bloom. "I think she sees it as an opportunity to deliver a decisive blow against Sophia's influence while simultaneously positioning herself as the stable, practical leader the kingdom needs. If something were to happen to Sophia during the service, something that could be blamed on security failures or radical elements, Victoria would have a justification for taking more direct control of royal affairs." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt the weight of his oath pressing down on him with unprecedented force. He had sworn to protect the royal family from all enemies, foreign and domestic, but what did that mean when the greatest threat came from within the family itself? "What can we do?" Marcus asked. "We fight," Lady Margaret replied simply. "We use every resource at our disposal to protect Sophia and expose Victoria's true nature before it's too late. But we have to be very careful. Victoria has been planning this for years, while we're just beginning to understand the scope of her ambitions." That conversation had taken place 3 days ago, and, since then, Marcus had been working feverishly to prepare for what was clearly going to be a climactic confrontation at the memorial service. He had identified a core group of absolutely loyal guards and staff members, but he was painfully aware that they were outnumbered by Victoria's supporters. The morning of the meeting that would change everything began with an ominous discovery. Thomas Whitmore found Marcus in the castle's main courtyard and urgently requested a private conversation. The old gardener's face was pale with fear and anger as he led Marcus to a secluded corner of the memorial garden. "They did it during the night," Thomas said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Destroyed her favorite bush, the one she planted herself to commemorate her wedding day. Cut it down at the roots and left the pieces scattered like refuse." Marcus knelt beside the destroyed rose bush, examining the deliberate, vicious damage. This wasn't random vandalism, it was a message, a psychological attack designed to cause maximum emotional impact just days before the memorial service.
Have you told Princess Sophia? Marcus asked. Not yet, Thomas replied.
I wanted to speak with you first, see if there was any way to soften the blow somehow.
She comes here every morning before breakfast, you know.
Has done ever since the Queen died.
When she sees this. Marcus understood the gardener's concern.
Princess Sophia was already under tremendous stress, and this deliberate destruction of something so personally meaningful would be devastating. But he also recognized that the timing was not coincidental. Victoria was escalating the psychological warfare as the memorial service approached. We'll tell her together, Marcus decided. She needs to understand what she's facing, but she also needs to know that she's not alone in this fight. They found Princess Sophia in her study, reviewing the final arrangements for the memorial service with Eleanor. Despite the pressure she was under, she had maintained her composure and continued working to ensure that the ceremony would be worthy of her mother's memory. When she looked up from the papers scattered across her desk, Marcus could see the strain in her eyes, but also the determination that made her so much like Queen Isabella. Thomas, Sir Marcus, good morning, she said, rising from her chair.
I was just reviewing the security arrangements for the service. I wanted to make sure we haven't overlooked anything important.
Marcus felt his heart break a little at her obvious effort to remain strong and focused despite everything that was happening around her.
Your Highness, Thomas has something he needs to tell you. Perhaps you should sit down. Sophia's expression grew immediately concerned as she registered the gravity in Marcus's voice.
She returned to her chair while Thomas, visibly struggling with emotion, explained what he had discovered in the memorial garden. The color drained from Princess Sophia's face as she listened to the description of the destroyed rose bush. Her hands clenched into fists in her lap, and Marcus could see her fighting to maintain control. The wedding rose, she said quietly when Thomas finished his account. Mother planted it the day she married father. She said it was to symbolize new beginnings and the hope that love would continue to grow and flourish no matter what challenges came. Eleanor moved to stand behind the princess's chair, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Your Highness, perhaps we should postpone the memorial service after all.
This level of harassment and intimidation.
No, Sophia said firmly, rising from her chair with renewed determination.
Absolutely not.
This is exactly what Victoria wants, to drive us into hiding, to make us abandon our principles out of fear. Mother faced far worse challenges than a jealous stepmother and some cowardly vandals, and she never backed down from what she knew was right. Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her courage, but also deep concern for her safety. Your Highness, I share your determination, but we have to be realistic about the dangers. The level of surveillance and harassment suggests that someone is planning something much more serious than vandalism. Before Sophia could respond, there was a sharp knock at the study door. Eleanor moved to answer it, but the door opened before she could reach it. King Alexander entered, followed closely by Queen Victoria and several of her supporters. The timing was clearly not coincidental. Victoria had been monitoring the situation and had chosen this moment for maximum psychological impact. Sophia, Alexander said, his voice strained with what appeared to be genuine distress.
I've heard about the damage to the memorial garden. I'm so sorry.
Victoria stepped forward, her expression a carefully crafted mask of sympathetic concern. It's such a terrible shame, she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. These attacks on poor Isabella's memory are becoming increasingly bold and vicious.
I fear for what might happen if we proceed with a public memorial service.
Marcus watched Victoria carefully, noting the subtle satisfaction in her eyes despite her concerned expression. She was enjoying this moment, savoring the pain she had caused while positioning herself as the voice of reason and caution. Which is why, Victoria continued, Alexander and I have decided that it would be best to cancel the public ceremony entirely. For security reasons, of course. We simply cannot risk exposing the royal family and innocent civilians to this level of threat.
The words hit Princess Sophia like a physical blow.
Marcus saw her sway slightly, and Eleanor immediately moved closer to provide support.
Cancel the memorial service?
Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper.
You want to cancel my mother's memorial service because some coward destroyed a rose bush?
It's not just the rose bush, dear, Victoria replied, her tone patronizingly gentle. There have been threatening letters, suspicious activities around the castle, reports of potential violence. The security services have advised us that proceeding with a large public gathering would be irresponsible.
Marcus stepped forward. Your Majesty, I've seen no such reports from the security services.
In fact, my investigations suggest that the threats can be managed with appropriate precautions. Victoria's mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of anger. Sir Marcus, your investigations are precisely part of the problem. Your emotional involvement in this situation has compromised your judgment and created unnecessary panic.
My judgment is perfectly sound, Marcus replied evenly. And my investigations have revealed information that suggests these threats may not be coming from external sources. The statement hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. Victoria's face went very pale, while Alexander looked confused and alarmed.
What do you mean by that? The king asked. Marcus knew he was walking into dangerous territory, but he also realized that this might be his only opportunity to expose the truth before it was too late. I mean that the pattern of surveillance, the detailed knowledge of palace routines, and the systematic nature of the harassment suggest inside involvement. Victoria recovered her composure quickly, but Marcus had seen the moment of panic in her eyes. That's a very serious accusation, Sir Marcus. I hope you have evidence to support such claims. I have enough evidence to warrant a thorough investigation, Marcus replied carefully. But I suspect that such an investigation might reveal uncomfortable truths that certain people would prefer to keep hidden.
The tension in the room was electric.
Alexander looked back and forth between his wife and his most trusted guard, clearly struggling to understand the implications of what was being said. Victoria made her decision quickly. Alexander, this is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that has made Sir Marcus unsuitable for his current position. He's seeing conspiracies everywhere, making wild accusations without proof. This is precisely why I've been saying he needs to be removed from Sophia's security detail. Wait, Princess Sophia interjected, her voice growing stronger.
Let's be very clear about what's happening here.
Someone with detailed knowledge of the castle has been conducting surveillance on me, vandalizing my mother's memorial garden, and sending threatening letters. When Sir Marcus attempts to investigate these crimes, he's accused of being paranoid and emotionally compromised. Meanwhile, Victoria, you're using these attacks as justification for canceling a memorial service that you've opposed from the beginning. The princess turned to face her brother directly.
Alexander, do you really not see the pattern here? Every attack, every threat, every incident has served Victoria's political interests perfectly. Either she's incredibly lucky, or she's not as innocent as she claims to be.
Victoria's careful composure finally cracked completely. Her face contorted with rage, and she stepped toward Princess Sophia with her hand raised threateningly.
How dare you? Victoria shrieked. You sanctimonious little hypocrite. You think you're so pure, so noble, so much better than everyone else. Well, let me tell you something about your precious mother. She wasn't the saint you think she was.
The room fell silent except for the sound of Victoria's harsh breathing. Even her own supporters looked shocked by the venom in her voice and the implications of what she was saying.
What did you say?
Princess Sophia's voice was dangerously quiet. Victoria realized she had gone too far, but she was too angry to retreat gracefully.
I said your mother wasn't the perfect queen everyone pretends she was. She had secrets, just like everyone else.
Secrets that could destroy her precious legacy if they ever came to light. Marcus felt his hand move instinctively toward his sword. The insult to Queen Isabella's memory was more than he could bear, and he could see similar reactions from other loyal staff members in the room. But, before anyone could respond to Victoria's outrageous claims, Lady Margaret's voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's quite enough, she said, entering the room with the dignity and authority that made her one of the most respected members of the royal family. Victoria, you will apologize immediately for those disgraceful remarks about my late sister. Victoria whirled to face Lady Margaret, her eyes blazing with fury and desperation. I don't have to apologize for telling the truth. Isabella had her secrets, and maybe it's time everyone knew what kind of woman she really was. And what kind of woman was that? Lady Margaret asked, her voice deceptively calm. Victoria hesitated, realizing that she was about to make accusations she couldn't support, but her anger and desperation drove her forward. She was manipulative, controlling, jealous of anyone who threatened her position. She destroyed people who got in her way, just like her precious daughter is trying to do to me. The accusations were so outrageous, so completely contrary to everything anyone knew about Queen Isabella, that they revealed more about Victoria's mental state than about their intended target. Marcus could see Alexander looking at his wife with growing horror and confusion. Victoria, the king said quietly, what are you saying? These accusations, they're not like you. They're not rational. For a moment, Victoria seemed to realize how far she had gone, how much she had revealed about her true feelings and motivations. She looked around the room, taking in the shocked faces of everyone present, and Marcus could see her calculating whether she could somehow recover from this self-inflicted disaster. But, instead of retreating or apologizing, Victoria doubled down on her attack. You want to know what's not rational, she said, her voice rising to an earshriek. What's not rational is allowing a dead woman to control this kingdom from beyond the grave. What's not rational is letting her spoiled daughter manipulate everyone with fake tears and false nobility. She turned to face Princess Sophia directly, her face twisted with years of accumulated hatred and resentment. You think you're so special, don't you? You think the people love you because you're good and pure and wonderful? Well, let me tell you what they really love. They love the idea of you, the fantasy of the perfect princess. But fantasies don't last forever, and when yours crumbles, you'll have nothing left. The outburst was so vicious, so completely uncontrolled, that even Victoria's own supporters seemed horrified. Marcus realized that they were witnessing the complete breakdown of whatever facade Victoria had been maintaining. The careful political maneuvering, the subtle manipulations, the gradual campaign of harassment, it had all been building toward this moment of explosive revelation. Princess Sophia stood perfectly still through Victoria's tirade, her face pale but composed. When the queen finally finished her attack, Sophia's response was delivered with quiet dignity that made Victoria's hysteria seem even more unbalanced by comparison. Victoria, she said softly, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you've lived with so much hatred for so long. I'm sorry that you see love and respect as things that must be taken rather than earned. And I'm sorry that my mother's memory threatens you so much that you feel the need to destroy everything connected to her legacy. The gentle response seemed to enrage Victoria even further. Don't you dare pity me, she screamed. I don't need your sympathy or your forgiveness. What I need is for you to disappear, to stop interfering with my plans, to stop making me look weak and inadequate. It was a complete confession, delivered in a moment of uncontrolled rage. Victoria had admitted to seeing Princess Sophia as an obstacle to her plans, had revealed the depth of her hatred and jealousy, and had essentially confessed to orchestrating the campaign of harassment and intimidation. Marcus exchanged glances with Lady Margaret, both of them recognizing that this moment represented a turning point. Victoria had exposed herself completely, had revealed her true nature to witnesses who could not be silenced or intimidated. But he also realized that this made her infinitely more dangerous, a cornered predator with nothing left to lose. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of additional guards, summoned by the commotion. But Marcus noticed that among the responding guards were several of Victoria's personal loyalists, men who had not been present when she made her damaging admissions. Victoria seemed to realize this as well, and Marcus could see her calculating how to spin the situation to her advantage. Despite her emotional breakdown, she was still a skilled political manipulator, and she would undoubtedly attempt to control the narrative of what had just occurred. Alexander, she said, suddenly, switching to a more controlled tone, I apologize for raising my voice. The stress of dealing with these security threats has been overwhelming. But my concerns remain valid. Proceeding with the memorial service represents an unacceptable risk. It was a masterful attempt at damage control, trying to reframe her outburst as understandable stress rather than revealing insight into her true character.
But Marcus could see that Alexander was no longer entirely convinced by his wife's explanations.
The king looked around the room, taking in the faces of people he had known and trusted for years, then, focusing on his sister's pale but determined expression.
"Sophia," he said quietly, "what do you want to do about the memorial service?"
It was a simple question, but Marcus recognized its significance. For the first time since Victoria had entered their lives, Alexander was asking for his sister's opinion rather than simply deferring to his wife's wishes. Princess Sophia straightened her shoulders and looked directly at her brother. "I want to honor our mother's memory the way she deserves to be honored, with courage, dignity, and an absolute refusal to be intimidated by those who would diminish her legacy.
The memorial service will proceed as planned."
Victoria's face went white with fury, but before she could respond, Lady Margaret spoke with the authority of decades of royal service.
"The memorial service will indeed proceed as planned," she said firmly.
"And I will personally oversee the security arrangements to ensure that Queen Isabella receives the tribute she deserves." Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with apprehension. The battle lines had been drawn more clearly than ever, and the memorial service had become the focal point of a struggle that would determine the future of the monarchy itself. Victoria's mask had slipped, revealing the true scope of her ambitions and the depths of her hatred, but that also meant she would be fighting with the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. The memorial service was still 5 days away, but Marcus knew that those 5 days would be among the most dangerous in the kingdom's history. The web that Victoria had spent years weaving was finally visible to all, but she still had enough power and influence to cause tremendous damage before she could be stopped. As the confrontation in Princess Sophia's study finally ended and the various participants dispersed to plan their next moves, Marcus realized that his oath to protect the royal family was about to face its ultimate test. The coming days would determine not just Princess Sophia's safety, but the very soul of the monarchy Queen Isabella had worked so hard to build and preserve. The breaking point. The aftermath of Victoria's explosive outburst reverberated through Ravenshollow Castle like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Word of the Queen's uncontrolled attack on Princess Sophia spread quickly through the palace's intricate network of servants, guards, and courtiers, creating an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty that seemed to permeate the very stones of the ancient building. Marcus spent the following day conducting what he privately thought of as reconnaissance missions, carefully gauging the loyalties and reactions of various palace personnel to the dramatic shift in the political landscape. What he discovered both encouraged and alarmed him in equal measure. The older staff members, those who had served under Queen Isabella, were almost universally supportive of Princess Sophia and horrified by Victoria's behavior. Mrs. Pemberton spoke for many when she confided to Marcus, "In all my years of service, I've never seen such disgraceful conduct from a member of the royal family."
Poor Queen Isabella would be mortified to see what's become of the dignity of the crown. However, the newer staff members, those hired since Victoria's marriage to King Alexander, were more divided.
Some seemed genuinely shocked by what they had heard about the Queen's outburst, but others appeared to view it as nothing more than palace gossip or political maneuvering. More troubling still, Marcus identified several individuals who seemed to be actively working to downplay the significance of Victoria's behavior or to spread alternative versions of events that painted the Queen in a more sympathetic light. The division within the Royal Guard was particularly concerning. The veterans, men like Sergeant Hayes and Lieutenant Crawford, remained steadfast in their loyalty to the traditional values of royal service. But Victoria's personal guards, along with several newer recruits, seemed to be consolidating into a separate faction that took their orders directly from the Queen rather than through the normal chain of command.
"It's not natural, sir," Hayes reported during one of their clandestine meetings.
A royal guard should serve the crown as an institution, not as the personal army of any individual member of the royal family.
But these lads seem to think their primary duty is to Victoria personally, rather than to the kingdom or the royal family as a whole.
The most disturbing intelligence came from Thomas Whitmore, who had been conducting his own careful observations of the memorial garden and its surroundings. The old gardener had discovered evidence of continued nighttime activities in the area, including what appeared to be detailed measurements and photographs of the garden's layout. "They're not just planning vandalism anymore, Sir Marcus," Thomas reported grimly. "Someone's been studying the sight lines from the garden to the surrounding buildings, measuring distances between the various monuments and memorial features.
It looks like they're planning something for the service itself.
Marcus felt his blood run cold as he absorbed the implications. The memorial service was scheduled to take place in the garden, with Princess Sophia expected to deliver a tribute speech from a small podium near her mother's favorite rose garden. If someone was indeed planning some kind of attack or disruption during the ceremony, the princess would be completely exposed and vulnerable. His concerns were amplified when Eleanor Fitzgerald approached him with intelligence she had gathered from her network among the ladies-in-waiting and female palace staff. Several of them had reported overhearing conversations between Victoria's supporters about the need for decisive action to resolve the ongoing conflicts within the royal family. "They're not speaking openly about specific plans," Eleanor explained, "but the tone of their conversations has changed dramatically since the confrontation in Princess Sophia's study. Before, they seemed to be focused on political maneuvering and gradual pressure. Now, there's an urgency, almost a desperation, in how they discuss the situation." Eleanor paused, clearly struggling with the implications of what she was about to say.
"Sir Marcus, I think they're planning something for the memorial service.
Something intended to eliminate Princess Sophia as a political factor once and for all." The words gave voice to Marcus's worst fears, but they also crystallized his understanding of what he was facing. This was no longer about palace politics or personal rivalries, it was about a direct threat to the life of the woman he had sworn to protect. That evening, Marcus requested an urgent meeting with Lady Margaret in her private chambers. The old lady received him with the grace and dignity that had made her one of the most respected members of the royal family, but he could see the strain of recent events in the lines around her eyes and the slight tremor in her hands as she poured tea for both of them. "You look troubled, Sir Marcus," she observed, settling into her favorite chair by the fireplace.
"More troubled than usual, I mean."
Marcus outlined the intelligence he had gathered, watching Lady Margaret's expression grow increasingly grave as he described the evidence of continued surveillance and the ominous conversations overheard by palace staff. When he finished his report, she was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames dancing in the fireplace. "I had hoped that Victoria's outburst might serve as a wake-up call," she said finally. "That seeing her true nature so clearly displayed might shock Alexander into taking decisive action. But I'm beginning to fear that she's moved beyond the point where she can be controlled through normal political channels." Lady Margaret rose from her chair and walked to the window, looking out at the memorial garden where preparations for the ceremony were already underway.
"Tell me honestly, Sir Marcus, do you believe Princess Sophia's life is in immediate danger?"
"Yes, my lady, I do," Marcus replied without hesitation. "The pattern of escalation, the timing, the level of detailed planning, everything points to something dramatic happening during the memorial service. And, given Victoria's state of mind, I don't believe she'll be satisfied with anything less than a permanent solution to what she sees as the Sophia problem." Lady Margaret nodded slowly, as if his assessment confirmed her own fears.
"Then, we must act accordingly.
Traditional protocols and diplomatic niceties are luxuries we can no longer afford." She returned to her chair and looked directly at Marcus, her eyes reflecting the steel that had made her such a formidable figure in royal circles for decades.
"I want you to know that whatever actions you deem necessary to protect Princess Sophia, you will have my full support.
If that means directly confronting Victoria's people, if it means disregarding official orders that conflict with your protective duties, if it means taking measures that might be seen as insubordinate, you do what you must do."
The authorization was both liberating and terrifying.
Marcus understood that Lady Margaret was essentially giving him carte blanche to act outside normal channels, but he also knew that such actions would mark him as a direct enemy of Queen Victoria and anyone who supported her. "There's something else you should know," Lady Margaret continued. "I've been in contact with certain members of the nobility who are growing increasingly concerned about Victoria's behavior and her influence over Alexander. They're not yet ready to take public action, but they're prepared to support measures designed to protect the stability of the monarchy." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "If something were to happen to Victoria during the memorial service, if she were to suffer some kind of accident or sudden illness that prevented her from continuing her current course of action, there would be influential voices willing to argue that such an event was fortuitous rather than tragic."
Marcus felt a chill at the implication.
Lady Margaret was suggesting that Victoria's removal from the equation would not be entirely unwelcome among certain segments of the nobility, and that such a removal might not face the level of investigation or retribution that would normally be expected.
My lady, Marcus said carefully, are you suggesting that I should consider taking direct action against Queen Victoria?
I'm suggesting that you should consider all options for protecting Princess Sophia and preserving the integrity of the crown, Lady Margaret replied diplomatically. History will judge us not by how well we followed protocols, but by whether we preserved the values and institutions that Queen Isabella died trying to protect. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger with an urgent summons for Marcus to report to King Alexander's private office. Lady Margaret and Marcus exchanged meaningful glances, both understanding that this unexpected meeting could represent either an opportunity or a trap. Marcus found King Alexander alone in his office, a circumstance that immediately raised his alertness level. Since his marriage to Victoria, the king rarely conducted important business without his wife present, and her absence suggested either that she was unaware of this meeting or that Alexander had deliberately excluded her. Sir Marcus, the king said, rising from behind his desk.
Thank you for coming so quickly. Please, sit down.
We have important matters to discuss. Marcus remained standing, his military training keeping him alert and ready to react quickly if necessary.
Your Majesty, I serve at your pleasure.
Alexander walked to the window that offered a view of the memorial garden, where workers were setting up chairs and decorative arrangements for the upcoming ceremony. His posture suggested a man carrying enormous weight, and, when he spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion and uncertainty. I've been thinking a great deal about recent events, the king said without turning around. About Victoria's behavior, about the threats against Sophia, about what my mother would want me to do in this situation. Marcus remained silent, recognizing that Alexander needed to work through his thoughts without interruption.
Victoria came to me after the confrontation in Sophia's study, Alexander continued.
She apologized for her outburst, said the stress of the security situation had overwhelmed her emotional control. She painted herself as a concerned stepmother trying to protect the family from external threats. The king finally turned to face Marcus, and the anguish in his eyes was unmistakable.
But I keep thinking about what she said, about the way she said it. The hatred in her voice when she spoke about my mother, the venom when she attacked Sophia. That wasn't stress, was it, Sir Marcus?
That was something much deeper and more dangerous. Marcus chose his words carefully. Your Majesty, I believe Queen Victoria has been under considerable strain lately. Whether that strain explains her behavior or merely reveals her true feelings is a judgment I'm not qualified to make. Alexander smiled bitterly. A diplomatic answer, but not a reassuring one.
Let me ask you directly, do you believe my wife poses a threat to my sister's safety?
The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that could reshape the entire political structure of the kingdom. Marcus realized that his answer could determine not just Princess Sophia's fate, but the future of the monarchy itself. Your Majesty, Marcus said slowly, I believe that anyone who sees Princess Sophia as an obstacle to their ambitions poses a potential threat to her safety. I also believe that the level of hatred and resentment Queen Victoria displayed during her outburst suggests that she views your sister as more than just a political inconvenience. Alexander closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, the gesture of a man wrestling with impossible choices.
She's my wife, Marcus.
I took vows before God and the kingdom to love and protect her.
How can I act against her based on suspicions and interpretations?
With respect, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, you also took vows to protect and serve your people, and to preserve the crown for future generations.
Sometimes those obligations conflict, and, when they do, a king must choose which duty takes precedence.
The king was quiet for a long moment, staring at a portrait of Queen Isabella that hung on the office wall. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. My mother tried to prepare me for the difficult decisions a king must make, but she never imagined I would face a choice like this. She never thought I might have to choose between my wife and my sister, between personal loyalty and royal duty. Marcus felt a surge of sympathy for the young man who had inherited a crown he wasn't fully prepared to wear, but he also knew that sympathy wouldn't protect Princess Sophia if Alexander proved unable to make the necessary hard choices.
Your Majesty, Marcus said gently, Queen Isabella's greatest gift to this kingdom wasn't her wisdom or her grace, important as those qualities were. Her greatest gift was her absolute commitment to putting the welfare of her people above her own comfort and convenience. She understood that true nobility comes from service, not from privilege. Alexander looked at him with something approaching gratitude. You're saying I should follow her example, regardless of personal cost. I'm saying that the memorial service in 3 days will be attended by thousands of people who loved and respected Queen Isabella. They're coming to honor her memory and to see that memory reflected in her children. If something were to happen to Princess Sophia during that service, if the people were to lose their connection to what the monarchy once represented, the damage to the crown might be irreparable. The king absorbed this assessment with the gravity it deserved. Finally, he moved to his desk and pulled out a sealed envelope, which he handed to Marcus. This contains special orders authorizing you to take any measures you deem necessary to ensure Princess Sophia's safety during the memorial service and, in the days surrounding it, Alexander said formally. Your authority supersedes any conflicting orders from other members of the royal household, and you are authorized to requisition any personnel or resources required to fulfill your protective duties. Marcus accepted the envelope with a deep bow. Your Majesty, I will not fail in this trust. I know you won't, Alexander replied. But, Marcus, I want you to understand something. If you act on these orders, if you take measures against Victoria or her supporters, there will be consequences. She has allies, people who benefit from her patronage and who will see any action against her as an attack on their own interests. You could face charges, court-martial, even accusations of treason. I understand, Your Majesty, Marcus replied. But some duties transcend personal safety. Alexander nodded, looking older and wearier than his years. My mother chose her guardians well. I only hope I prove worthy of the trust you're placing in me. As Marcus left the king's office, he felt the weight of the sealed orders in his pocket like a burning coal. Alexander had essentially given him the authority to act as he saw fit to protect Princess Sophia, but they both knew that using that authority would likely mean crossing lines from which there could be no return. He made his way to the guard barracks, where he found Sergeant Hayes drilling a group of newer recruits in combat techniques. Marcus waited until the session was complete, then approached Hayes for a private conversation. Sergeant, I have new orders from His Majesty, Marcus said, showing him the sealed envelope. I need you to identify every member of the guard detail who can be trusted absolutely, men who will follow orders without question and who understand that their primary loyalty is to the crown rather than to any individual. Hayes examined the royal seal on the envelope, his expression growing serious. How many men do you need, sir? As many as we can get, Marcus replied grimly. And I need them ready for action within the next 24 hours. I have reason to believe the memorial service will be the target of some kind of attack, and we need to be prepared to respond with overwhelming force if necessary. Hayes nodded, his veteran instincts recognizing the gravity of the situation. I'll have a list for you within the hour, sir. Men who served under Queen Isabella, mostly, plus a few of the younger lads who understand what real honor means. Good. And, Sergeant? This operation is to remain absolutely confidential. If word of our preparations reaches the wrong people, Princess Sophia's life could be forfeit. As Marcus continued his preparations throughout the evening, he felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and dread that preceded major military actions. He had served in enough campaigns to recognize the signs, the heightened awareness, the careful attention to detail, the knowledge that lives would soon hang in the balance based on decisions made in the coming hours. But this felt different from his previous military experiences. This time, he wasn't fighting foreign enemies on distant battlefields, he was preparing to confront threats that came from within the very institution he had sworn to protect. The enemy wore the same uniforms, lived in the same castle, and claimed the same loyalties that he did. As the night wore on and his preparations intensified, Marcus found himself thinking about Queen Isabella's final words, protect them. Protect what we've built. At the time, he had interpreted those words as a simple request to look after her family. Now he understood that she had been asking him to preserve something much larger and, more important, the idea that the monarchy could be a force for good in the world,
that power could be wielded with wisdom and compassion rather than selfish ambition. The memorial service was now just 2 days away, and Marcus knew that those 2 days would determine whether Queen Isabella's legacy would survive or whether it would be buried beneath the ambitions of those who saw the crown as nothing more than a tool for personal advancement. The pieces were in motion, the lines were drawn, and the final confrontation was rapidly approaching. Marcus only hoped that when the dust settled, there would still be something left worth protecting.